courtroom was shrouded in silence, interrupted only by the crisp ring of the judge's gavel on smooth wood, a sound that resonated like the shutting of a coffin lid. Seated at the defense table was an old woman, frail and shaking, her wrinkled hands holding a dilapidated purse as if it was the last fragment of her world. Her name was Martha Elwood, a widow who'd lost everything but her pride. And now, even that was being taken from her under the cold stare of strangers. Mrs. Elwood, the judge had spoken earlier, his voice sounding condescending. You're requesting this court for mercy, but then you might have considered that before you couldn't pay your debts. His cold laugh spread throughout the room, accompanied by derisive smirks from the plaintiff's side. To him, she was not a human being, merely another case file, another statistic, another drain on an expensive suit. But to Martha, this had nothing to do with money. It was about home, the home her deceased husband built with his own blisters on his hands. Brick by brick, the home that still called his name in every room. If you think kindness still counts, that a single gesture of kindness can transform a life, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories. Because what comes next will show that heroes don't always wear uniforms or business attire. Sometimes they ride motorcycles. Martha sat quietly while the other lawyer, arrogant, slick, and with an armful of documents, tore her dignity to shreds. Each statement was another hit to her coffin. The judge nodded happily, clearly amused. Her appointed lawyer hardly raised his eyes, too afraid to battle for her. It was futile. The courtroom glowed with light from the chandeliers. But to Martha, all was gloom. 3 years prior, her husband Harold, a down-to-earth mechanic, had passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. The funeral costs, medical expenses, and loss of earnings had consumed her. The small-town bank, which was now run by a giant corporation, did not care about her tale. They did not want her home as payment. They wanted it because of what the land underneath was worth. She had written letters, pleaded for extensions, even pled before the same judge. But nobody heard. When the case of foreclosure went to trial, she had embraced one bitter truth. The world no longer cared. But fate works in queer ways. 3 days ago, something had gone awry. On her way home from the supermarket, Martha had lost her purse on the sidewalk in front of a roadside diner. She didn't realize it, but someone did. A man on a Harley, his arms covered in tattoos, and his leather jacket with Hell's Angels written on it, saw it and chased after her. He caught up with her as she was wrestling with her groceries, handing her back her purse with a curt nod. His name was Ronan. When he asked if she was okay, she said yes, though her trembling voice and teary eyes told another story. Moved by her quiet pain, she finally shared her situation. She didn't ask for pity or help, only someone to listen. But Ronan did more than that. He looked her in the eye and said softly, "You're not alone anymore, Mom." Martha hadn't taken him seriously, not until this morning. Back in the courtroom, the judge sat back, lips crimping into a pleased smirk. "Mrs. Elwood," he announced icily, "this court hereby rules in favor of the words froze on his tongue as the double doors grated open with a great creak that stilled the room. All eyes turned, and then the booming sound of boots pounding marble crashed like thunder. 3 men entered, and the atmosphere in the courtroom changed. The doors of the courtroom creaked open, and the heavy boots thudded through the marble corridor like thunder rolling. Every head turned towards the door. Ronan was in the lead, his white speckled beard shining in the fluorescent light, his battered leather vest embroidered with old patches that told of brotherhood, honor, and years on the road. 2 others followed behind him, a stout, beardless man with a dark beard, and a younger biker with brown, shoulder-length hair, his sunglasses concealing the quiet flame in his eyes. They stood out wildly among the suits and briefcases, and still, they seemed to own the room the moment they walked through the door. The bailiff instinctively moved forward, hand hovering near his belt, but Ronan lifted a calm, commanding hand. "We're not here for trouble," he said evenly. His voice carried authority, not the kind that comes from power, but from purpose. He strode directly to the defense table and came to a stop beside Martha, who sat locked into position, eyes wide, her lashes quivering with unshed tears. The courtroom burst into shocked whispers. No one knew what was going on. Then, without comment, Ronan laid down a heavy envelope on the table and turned toward the judge. "That's a certified check," he stated flatly. "It pays everything she owes, the mortgage, the interest, and every single court fee. So perhaps," his voice growing harder, "you can quit laughing now." The courtroom fell silent. The judge's jaw was agape. The smug opposing attorney blinked, utterly at a loss for words. For an instant, time itself stood still. Then at last the judge sat back, clearing his throat, the smirk erased. "Well," he stumbled, uncertain, If the payment is confirmed, then the case is hereby dismissed." Martha gasped, her bony hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The same courtroom that had felt like a cage mere seconds before now echoed with the sound of freedom. Those who had sympathized with her now gazed in awed silence, and some even laughing through their tears. Ronan took her hand gently and steadied her on feet. "Told you, ma'am," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." Martha attempted to speak, but her voice cracked under the strain of her thankfulness. She squeezed his hand, crying softly, Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Sunlight flooded the high windows then, golden, warm, alive, enveloping her in light. For the first time in years, she felt her late husband there as well, smiling from somewhere just off that radiance. As Ronan and the remaining bikers prepared to leave, the courtroom, once judgmental and cold, started clapping, softly at first, then more loudly. Even the judge, sheened with embarrassment and red in the face, nodded slowly and unwillingly. Martha sat down again, hugging her worn handbag, but now no longer containing just memories of the past. It contained hope. It contained a fresh start. And as the big doors closed on those men, the sound that filled the courtroom was not one of fear any longer. It was one of faith in humanity renewed. Martha came home that night. She sat on her porch while the sun went below the horizon, illuminating the world with amber and gold. The wind brought the distant rumble of motorcycle engines fading into the far-off distance. Powerful, steady, and full of promise. With her eyes closed, she whispered a quiet prayer, not for herself, but for the men who reminded her that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes, they ride motorcycle. If this story touched your heart, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe to Real Kindness Stories, because somewhere out there, someone still believes in doing good, even when the world forgets how.